Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for being here. How many of you are feeling tired? So the context of right now is you've had a lot of talk since the morning. Yeah, many of you have been sitting for a long while. Do you want to get up? Stretch a little bit. I'm being very selfish because I want you to hear what I'm going to say, and therefore, I need you to attend. So let's all get up. And I'm going to do a little jig. And you can see this is alive, alive, alert, awake, enthusiastic. And I'm alive, alert, awake, enthusiastic. Go on. I'm alive, awake, alert, enthusiastic. I'm alive, awake, alert, awake, alert, alive, alive, awake, alert, enthusiastic. There you go. Thank you so much. Drink some water, and then let's talk a little bit. So when I was told about the topic, I had thought of something else. Now that I've attended 2 days of absolutely marvelous talks, I'm being greedy. I'm going to talk a little bit about my experience here as well towards the end. So I will show you a few slides towards the end and race through them because what I really wanted to say is also about the last 2 days. So first the model, what I was supposed to talk about, and then. So a lot of people here, I was so happy to hear, talked about their journey and the journey of the intervention that they have been talking about, or their understanding of autism. And it's been the same for us. When we started to try and understand, it's been a journey, we're still on it. I don't think most of us really know what autism is. It's like that elephant in the room and 5 blind men trying to see it from each perspective. We don't know whether we've got the whole. And that's where we were. In 2002, 2004, when I returned from the UK, that's where we were. But what was very obvious to us was that our community had needs. At that point of time, even diagnosing was very difficult. And at that point of time, the community that was around us came to us and kept repeatedly saying, yes, you've diagnosed. If you've diagnosed, what are we going to do about it? And that need has been increasing. We all know that. The absolute necessity of having a scalable model, not person-centric. And the other thing that we found along the line initially was the diagnostic versus intervention confounding variable. We started off thinking, if you know how to diagnose, you know how to intervene. That's usually true of most medical disorders. Those of you who are bakers, when the bread turns out a certain way, do you know what the ingredients were or what the process was? Most of us can tell when we taste a loaf of bread. You know whether it's stale, you know something's gone wrong, you know it's hard or soft. But how much does that tell you about what went in and what went wrong and what it would be like the next time? So for us, finding out whether a child has autism gave no indication of what do we work on. Good bakers know that there is salt in bread. But at the end of it, when you eat that bread, you don't taste the salt. But you need it with the yeast to slow down the process and create a particular taste. So the salt is lost, and we don't know it as a real ingredient unless you know the process. And the same set of ingredients, if you use them a little differently, you can make cookies with a very different texture, a little bit of sugar, a little less of salt. And for us, this is what autism started looking like. We knew the end result, and we were trying to deconstruct, and I think all of us are trying to deconstruct what's going on behind the scenes, really. So we kept learning from this process, and over the years, we thought, should we look at intervention models? So we went and trained in a few things. Should we look at symptoms? And then we got this idea a few years ago, going back to the basics, going back to learn from the source. teaches a baby to do all these things? We don't know. They come wired. We know that's what autism is. We know that the social salience, and I think Dr. Wen Lawson talked about it in the morning, the social preference, Bhishmadev talked about it in the other hall. The preference is not there. And therefore, beyond a point in time, the ASD is going to create itself. You're not going to have social preference, therefore you're not going to attend to social stimuli and pick up those cues, and you're not going to learn them. So it is almost creating itself. And what's happening in the very early years are the foundations of what's going to happen next. So if this wiring is going to carry on, then there's a different sort of outcome that's going to happen. And if this wiring something has to be done about it, then it has to be very much in the very early years. So what does our learning say today? It says that what can we do? We can't change the wiring. What we can do is try to understand the impact of the autism on the development. Where are these two lines going separately? What's the impact of that? And maximize the developmental gains that the autism is bringing into. That's all we can do. So we kept looking for salt, kept looking for the missing ingredient. We don't think we found it yet. I don't think we know it yet. But this is what our current framework looks like. Our current framework says, what does the brain do? The brain networks. This is at birth. The neurons are present, the connections are not. At 1 month is the second one. At 3 months, the connections have really grown stronger. By 15 months, and then by the age of 2, the connectivity between the neurons, the synaptic connections have reached to an almost by 3 years, almost the level that they're going to be. This is the amount of connectivity that's happening in the early years. And we used to think, or science used to think, that the early 2-3 years were silent because the children weren't talking. The children weren't doing things. But this much is happening with this rapidity in the very early years. This is what the brain looks like. It's made of connections. What recent neuroscience is saying is it's not about locating it in a particular structure. It is about how this structure talks to another structure. How often, in what context, and how fast. And how many neurons or circuits are getting fired at the same time. That's what determines the functionality, not the ability. The functionality in a context. That's what's going to determine this part. So you may have the motor circuits working, but if they are not going to fire alongside the social ones, alongside the sensory ones, if they're not connected at the right time in context, you're not going to get the performance. So this is our learning over a period of time from the neurobiology. Neurons that fire together, wire together. You have to make them fire together, all the systems. This is what an actual resting brain can look like. These are all connections. These are the amount of connections. This is the quantity and density of connections that happens at rest. Even right now, it's not one system that's working for you. All the systems are working together. And that's where we started getting drawn to the word connect. Unless we were connecting with each other, all of us, unless the brain was connecting two different parts of itself, we're not going to be able to find a performance in a context. So what do you need to connect? Within the child, you connect a particular system. So people have talked about the sensory system. We know the therapies, sensory integration therapy. All the senses need to either work in balance with or in an integrated way with each other. So within a sense, all the sensory organs have to get connected. But then, more than that, thereafter, the sensory system has to connect to the motoric system. It also has to connect to the social system because your environment is going to change. Similarly, the motor system has to connect to the social, to the language, and you see where I'm going. They all have to connect to each other. It cannot be about one system or another, because even if somebody is the best athlete in the world, even if someone is the best singer in the world, the thing that a parent tells me is, he'll sing at home, but you put him outside, he's not going to sing. Because the social system is not getting connected to the other systems. So in that place, either the sensory system is getting overwhelmed, but it's not about ability then. What is it about? And these are the questions we keep asking ourselves. Connect to the biocycles. Dr. Lawson in the morning talked about interoception. Most of our children, most of them, have either got a problem with sleeping, or with eating, or with feeding, or being able to tell when they're going to do toileting, or being able to have an energy level that's balanced. All of these are biorhythms and biocycles. It's also one of the biggest things that we found was an obstacle to accessing therapies. Children who haven't slept well are not going to be able to access any kind of therapy. Their learning goes down immediately. So we realized that at that age, 0 to 6, unless we worked on biocycles and connected them to their own internal rhythms, this was probably not going to be effective. And then once we're talking about internal connects, what do you want to get the child connected to, or whom do you want to get the child connected to? And that's what we do all the time. That's what I've been doing the last 2 days, connecting with different people. And it gives such a warm feeling. The connectedness across cultures, the child getting connected to the family, to the mother, to the parent, the child getting connected to peers, that's what we look at. The child getting connected to the ecosystem around him. This is my home. This is my school. These are plants, these are animals, this is the earth. It's the ecosystem around him. And we're doing this all the time, all of us, in a multitasking way. We are all connected to everything. You're sitting here in a conference. It's an ecosystem you have entered. It's not home. It's a social context. The child getting connected to the social context. We don't even think about these things. But the child has to know where he is. You need to know. That's how you dressed up in the morning. That's what you carried with you through the day, because you knew what you were going to do. You were connecting to the context. I wanted you to listen to my talk. I connected to the context of right now and what was happening throughout the day and said, let's do a little jiggle. So it's the connection to the social context that our children sometimes are not able to do. And all the time, we are also connected to the community. Whether it's the community of professionals, whether it is your religion, it could be your community in terms of, in the virtual world of gaming, I'm connected to this kind of a game. But we have community. We all want to belong. We want to be connected to someone. And sometimes when you deconstruct this, all children at all times need to be connected to at least a few of these things to prevent the isolation. So it is not just about working from within the child. We realized that unless we were able to connect them with all these things, including the space around them, it was not going to work. But what about the other way of connecting? What we talk about as advocacy, awareness, the social context, understanding the child. And this is the opposite connect. Connecting the world around them to them. Helping others understand autism, what you're doing right now. And do it with intent, do it with, not just a conference, although these conferences are wonderful, but doing it on a daily basis. Get the parents connected to the child, what we had called about as a strength-based approach. See them for who they are, but also let their teachers see them for who they are. Their peers see them for who they are. It's not about accepting a child despite, it's about accepting them because they exist. They just are, like you are, like I am. They exist, therefore they are, and they are acceptable as they are. But helping people to educate this, and this means sometimes a child has to dress well for a function, but making sure the accommodation is there of taking their sensory sensory overwhelming into account. A child who needs to have a haircut, working on that goal, because the child will look smart and 10 people will get attracted to him. There's no shame in that. We do it all the time. So our journey has really been this. We have come to an integrated center, services provided under one roof. seeing the child as a whole. Initially, we thought we needed to understand all of this first, but increasingly we realized that unless the family was at the center of this, nothing was going to happen, because none of it got generalized. So family work is one of the central things that we now look at, and it has to be context relevant, which means it has to be cultural, and it has to be where we are starting from, wherever locally and otherwise we are starting from. The foods from here, the cultural practices of here, the way the child eats here with their hands. We could not think about spoon fork. That's not part of the developmental milestone in India in most states. So we had to redo some of that to make it more context relevant. So basically the principles and philosophies on which the model is based is intrinsic motivation. Basically that means for us is the objective is I want to do, not I can do. The child should be feeling I want to, not I can. I can do a lot of things, don't want to do them, doesn't give me happiness, not going to do them. And that's how all of us work. Why not for children? So working on the intrinsic motivation, not external rewards, and symptom reduction versus building the foundation. So we don't look at this is the symptom, we have to reduce it. We look at building the foundations. I'll talk a little bit about what that means. So the foundations that we see are very, very important. I'm just using different words for, I think, something that I heard in the last 2 days. Right in the early years, the foundations are not really about social interaction or about language. The foundations really, we feel, are social preference, social orientation. Is the child even interested in looking at the social, at a person? Can I make the person so interesting that they are attracted to people? Because otherwise their wiring is not towards people. Awareness of self and of others like me. Many children do not seem to see the difference between objects and people very much at that age. That's part of their wiring. Can I increase the social salience of a person? Yes, there are ways to, having positive interaction. And the foundation is also the registration and processing of all the senses and motoric stimuli. So these are the foundations that we work on initially. The last principle is integration via splintering. Instead of working on one thing, we work on things together. This has to connect to that. That has to connect to that. Build connections. Don't work in isolation. Don't work on just speech. Don't work on just motor. Don't work on just sensory. Build connections, because that's what the brain is wired towards. Include families all the time. Target areas of intervention are therefore sensory motor integration, biorhythms, social cognition, communication, and access to experiences of social interaction, as many as possible at that age, and as many positive ones as possible at that age. We feel these are the foundations, and as the children grow, they will start looking at specific domains, and we can look at that as they grow up a little bit. The team comprises now of about 25 people. We have occupational therapists, we have sensory integration therapists, we have developmental psychologists, we have 2 psychiatrists, we have an expressive arts and movements therapist, we have a music therapist. All of them combine, and we work on this unifying framework along with the family and the communities. This is just the structure. Not going to go into it. I'm going to show you a little video, if I could have that playing from there.
The Early Intervention Center at Children First is a multidisciplinary center for children on the autism spectrum or who have other developmental difficulties. So we have an integrated setup which includes occupational therapy, social communication and language therapy, group work, parent support and coaching, and other family-centered work, and regular medical reviews with a psychiatrist.
For many years, we thought in medical science and human development that the early years in a child, up till 0 to 3 or 4, were quite silent, that children learned only after they started speaking, only after they started going to school.
But now we know definitively that these are the foundation years, and there's a lot happening silently but very rapidly. These are the years that are the most important in the foundation of what is later to come.
Occupational therapy for 0 to 6 years of age in children will focus more on the child's play, the exploration, and how the child is receiving that input. But in autism, these skills are impaired, that the child is not able to receive the inputs from the environment, or learning through the environment could not be possible because the child will have difficulties in gross motor skills or their fine motor skills, or there could be overlying difficulties in the sensory integration. So in this intervention at Children First, we are mindfully constructing the games based on the child's skill set and also on the concerns of the parents and the concerns which we observe in our assessment, and the activities are constructed on the basis of that, and also keeping in mind about the optimal challenge or the just right challenge for that child, so that the child will feel intrinsically motivated for that activity, which will help him in learning the skill better.
Before language and communication, we have to establish a connect. The foundational skill, the connect, is the building block for any social orientation, motivation, language and communication. So our main basis for this is that if I can help the child socially connect with the world around him, people, the space, he will automatically be motivated to want to communicate, to want to share his experiences with everyone around him.
So how we try to create the social connect is by creating repeated positive experiences for the child with other people, and we do this through play. So what the therapist needs to do is to attune to the child, to what the child is connecting to, and also the child's interests and strengths. By doing that, what we really aiming to do is to make the child experience the joy and the magic in social connect.
When a child comes with sensory processing difficulties, social and language communication difficulties, interacting with one more child or 3 more children, and the group atmosphere in general becomes very, very hard. So in children with autism, how we mold around that common object that's so sensory in nature that all 5 or 6 of them can come together and actually interact with each other through that object forms a crux of the group work.
While designing our centers, we kept a few things in mind. We wanted the space to be simple, clutter-free, and not too overwhelming for the children. Also, we aimed at designing a space that encourages exploration as well as independence. And most importantly, we want to make sure that our children playing here are always safe.
So we have to be very mindful of the social environment for this child as well. So each and every team member takes the time to mindfully attune themselves to figuring out the expectations for these children. The model helps them to understand how to bridge these gaps. The expectation is not from the child, but also from the adults around the child on how we are to connect to each of these children mindfully.
In our intervention program, our objective is that the family is always an equal part in the therapeutic journey. Our collective aim is that the child is able to apply the learned skill even in his real life environment, with his family, with his peers, and in the larger community.
सपोज़ कि मैं पहले रेडी हो गई, सपोज़ अच्छे से तैयार हो गई, तो आके मुझे बोलता है कि बाल बाल खोल के मेरे ऐसे करके सीधे करके आई लाइक इट. तो एक ये चीज़ एक मेरे लिए एक्चुअली बहुत बड़ी चीज़ है मैम, क्योंकि ऑब्वियसली उस बच्चे के साथ जो ये ना एक्सप्रेस कर पाए कि मैं क्यों रो रहा हूँ, और ये एक्सप्रेस ना कर पाए कि मुझे क्या चाहिए, अगर वो ये आके मुझे बोलता है कि आई लाइक दिस और आई लाइक दैट, तो दिस इज़ एक्चुअली बिग थिंग ना. तो ये एक्चुअली यहाँ आके ये चीज़ होती है. तो नो डाउट इस मामले में तो मैं इस चीज़ को बोलती हूँ कि अर्ली इंटरवेंशन इज़ एक्चुअली वेरी गुड.
Thank you. I'm not going to go into the steps of the model or how why it's called Smart Connect. You've heard about the connect, and that's the central theme of our model. What I am going to talk a little bit about is the response to this model. Desiree, who I don't think is here in the audience, asked me yesterday in the evening, what does success mean for these children? What is the answer about when would a parent feel okay about saying, yes, I think my child has reached where he needs to reach? And I think that's a question that we should all ask ourselves, and the parents often ask themselves. A happy, connected child and a connected family is what we are aiming towards. And I think that question has stayed with me and will probably stay with me and will become one of the questions that I will probably ask every family that comes to me now. So thank you, Desiree, for asking me that question. But that's what we are finding with the model. It's not about how many of them start speaking by a certain age. It is far more about how connected they are to their families, to the environment, to the context, and how happy they are within. And how much does the parent, the family, and the school understand them and want to be with them? That's what we are really seeing. Still a journey. I still say we don't have the answers. We are still operationalizing and training people and building a community of concern. But my one thing that I wanted to talk about, I have exactly 3 minutes left, is the dilemma we've faced, is what I've been experiencing the last 2 days. There is such immense and beautiful work going on everywhere in the world. We get to know of it when we meet like this. But we need for parents to be able to access it, not just in a conference where there are 800 people. Why is it that we are not being able to provide this information and this knowledge to the common person at all times? And this is a question that I have often struggled with. What we are trying to do from no other perspective but from this is that whatever work we are doing, we are making videos of it now, and by the end of the month, we are going to start putting them up on our website free of cost for anyone to access. It's knowledge. We need to share it. And I really deeply am grateful to the ASMC and India Autism Center. I had not known when this conference was announced that it is going to be free for anyone to come in. Registration has been free. I have not seen that happen in many, many years. Thank you so much, with deep, heartfelt gratitude for that sentiment for everyone. And with that, I just want to say to all of you, I don't think anything is ever going to happen in isolation. We all have had our journeys. I feel really connected to all of you. I wish I could give all of you a big hug right now because of the warmth that I've been feeling the last 2 days, because of the resonance that I have felt often in the last 2 days. So thank you for being yourselves, and I wish there was a way to give all of us a hug right now. Thank you.